In 2011, an online personality known only as Daniel Black uploaded a set of 3 mysterious photographs. Dubbed the Fen werewolf, Mr. Black claims that the photos come from a piece of property where dogman sightings and other strange activity are regular occurrences. The photographs are some of the strangest and perhaps clearest in dogman research history. The Manwolf Files team investigates the story and will use experimentation to discover if the photos are genuine. If they are, what exactly is the Fen werewolf?
The Fen werewolf photographs are really interesting because they're kind of unique in the dogman phenomenon. Normally the photos that you get that are alleged evidence are blurry, they're out of focus, they're far away, you can't really tell what's happening. The Fen werewolf, though, whatever it is, whether it be fake or otherwise, is really, really clear. You can get a really good look at the subject in these set of photographs. There is a whole backstory to the Fen werewolf photographs, allegedly on this site called Infinite Monkey, this blog, which is owned by supposedly a guy named Daniel Black. Back in 2011, uploaded these photos with the backstory of him having investigated the property that they were taking on.
It was posted by a Toby Venablaze. The article is written as if done by an investigator named Daniel Black. However, it should be noted that the date that the article was posted was April 1st, 2011. So I think that's a pretty big indicator already what kind of article this is. Farmer somewhere in England amongst the Fens had experienced a cattle mutilation of some sorts. The investigator, Daniel Black, came into contact with the farmer, and basically the farmer nor the vet could satisfactorily explain what exactly happened to the cattle. They knew it was some kind of predator, carnivorous animal, but they didn't know what exactly it was, especially them being in the UK. You gotta think there's not a whole lot of large predators besides wolves, maybe. 3 weeks pass, and the farmer is given a pseudonym in the article. The name is John. John begins setting up some security measures. And what he does is he sets up a security light that's motion detected, and on top of that, he sets up a webcam that is light sensitive. So when the light goes off, the webcam will take a photo and then directly download that photo to the hard drive of a PC. John decided to pen up his cattle at night because he didn't want whatever this predatory animal was having another easy kill. So John wakes up when he hears a crash, and he thinks he hears something moving outside, but he can't see anything through the window. But he sees that the security light is on, so something did move through the area, and so he goes to the PC to see the downloaded images from the webcam to see if he got anything. And according to the timestamp, the first timestamp was 3:17 a.m. An upright figure enters the yard, and it's kind of lurking behind. It's just kind of walking through there. And then another picture, again, it's in the middle. A second photo is captured that showcases this upright figure, which can best be described as very werewolf looking. Is kind of like looking around. It looks like it's looking directly at the camera. And then the third photo that is snapped within that few minute range shows that upright figure quickly darting out of there's heavy motion blur, but it's still more or less in the center of the frame. Farmer John is freaked out. He also notices that his dogs didn't go off in response to this intruder, and he finds his dogs downstairs in the kitchen cowering in fear, and their ears are flat against their heads, and they're freaked out. And he didn't go outside until daylight because he himself was scared of whatever it was. So 2 things to kind of take notice. The first one is if the webcam was set off by light, I don't see why the webcam would have taken a total of 3 pictures unless the security light turned off and then turned back on 2 more times after the initial time. So to me, that doesn't make any sense. And then on top of that, the article is written from the perspective of an investigator named Daniel Black. I have not heard of Daniel Black. That doesn't mean Daniel Black doesn't exist. The website that this is posted on is Toby Venably's blogspot.com, and the author of the article, or at least the one who posted the article, is Toby Venably's on April 1st, 2011. So I think there's a lot to call into question here.
There are a few problems with the Fen werewolf story. One of them being that Daniel Black and the agency he supposedly worked for of investigators is no longer contactable. The email given doesn't even exist anymore, so we can't actually confirm that this story is even something that was ever actually investigated. There's also the problem that this was uploaded on April 1st of 2011. Could be an April Fool's joke of some kind, just a super elaborate one. But that doesn't mean that there's not holes with the photographs themselves as well. As a graphic designer, I got to looking for visual elements that might cue me in to evidence that it might be fabricated or digitally edited. The first thing that I noticed was that this subject, whatever it is, only has one shadow. And if you look at the photograph, there's kind of dimly illuminated objects behind the subject and more brightly illuminated objects in front of it where it's facing in that second photograph, which suggested at the time to me that there were 2 light sources. Maybe one was farther away or it was dimmer or something like that. So I conducted an experiment. I conducted an experiment to see if there was a way to have 2 light sources but only one shadow.
Right, so here's what we're doing the experiment. The experiment's super simple. We have 2 different light sources in this particular parking lot, and you can do this anywhere, on the sidewalk, parking lot, wherever you have 2 sources of light, like street lamps, what have you, and we're going to place a tall object between the 2 pieces of light somewhere. The goal is to figure out if there's a way, probably in relation to how far the object is from one light source or the other, to make it so the object is only casting one shadow. Well, as it turns out, you cannot get the object to only be casting one shadow unless you are seriously, right up against one of them. Now, of course, one of the caveats of the Fen werewolf photos is that it does seem like the light behind the subject is much dimmer than the one that it's facing, which is exactly the kind of setup that we have here. For the shadow to be cast in a way that's boldest facing away from that back light, you pretty much need to be right up under that dimmer light for something like that light to not affect it. Of course, the problem ends up being that the shadows that you end up casting are actually pretty equal here. So, of course, then the problem is, why would the shadow facing the brighter light, even if it was right up against that dimmer light, why would the shadow facing the brighter light be the darkest?
As it turns out, that was actually a pretty flawed experiment, because I had failed to realize that there was actually another object in the foreground, this cart or wooden wagon of some sort, and it looks like it's got basically a flat floor with walled borders. And the problem is that the border that you can see of this cart is shadowed in while the floor of it is lit up, which, if there really was a light source where the subject was facing, you would expect that wall to be more lit up. And if it wasn't, that would have to mean that there's an object the same shape as the wall in front of the wall, which there doesn't seem to be, because for one thing, you can't see it in the photograph. And second, because that would also shadow in the floor there. So it seems like what's actually happening is you have it set up like this, and there's light coming in this way that's illuminating the floor, but not that wall. And there's no light back here, which means that there's no light to illuminate that wall right there. And in that sense, it then makes perfect logic as to why there's only one shadow. The light play is still a little bit strange in the photograph. One thing that I noticed in that first photo, when it's stepping into the center, is there's this black border behind its leg. And what's kind of weird about that is that's not really a thing you see with fur or hair. If you look at any pictures of animals on trail cams or anything like that, they're pretty non-bordered because they're just, as real as their environment. They don't have a rough transition of any kind. Now, that could be explained by hair coloration, but it doesn't seem to be the case. If the hair was maybe black tipped or something like that, we would see that all over the body, and instead we have this beige color throughout the entire body. We do, however, also have a bit more realistic lighting. At one point, when it's in the center, it's kind of got its leg back here, and this leg is actually shadowed in, which might mean that it's blocking the light source from behind it with its leg because it's further back. And then as we see it make a further step, that leg is illuminated once more. So it is interacting with the light in at least a semi-realistic manner, which also kind of brings into question, let's say this is a 3D model or a Photoshop creation of some kind, because it's not a costume, it's way too good looking for a costume. That's pretty masterful looking CGI for something as easy to mess up as a black border to still be present. There was so much attention to lighting and detail put into this model, if it is a model, that I would really contest whether or not there could have been a background editing mistake on that leg, especially considering we don't see it happen in other photographs of this set, and we see really interesting lighting effects that would require some level of thought. So I don't really know what's happened in the Fen Werewolf photos. I can't rule out to any extent that it's CGI. There might even be some elements that suggest that it's CGI. Again, that black border is very, very strange either way. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense either way, but one of those answers has to make sense, obviously. It's very compelling stuff. It is really compelling. It's one of the first things that I've looked at in the Dogman evidence base that I really just, I can't definitively debunk.